All right, let's get into it. We're going to tackle a really interesting question that sits right at the heart of the whole EV revolution. Why on earth don't electric cars need gearboxes? I mean, think about it. For more than 100 years, gears have been totally essential to making a car go. Whether you were grinding the clutch on a stick shift or just cruising in an automatic, that gearbox was a fundamental piece of the puzzle. And then EVs show up and just, toss it in the bin. So why? What changed that made this critical component suddenly unnecessary? Well, to really get why EVs don't need a gearbox, we have to flip the question around. We first need to understand why gasoline cars desperately do. Believe me, that whole complicated dance of clutches and cogs wasn't put there for fun. It was a really clever solution to a really big problem. And that problem? It's all about something called the optimal RPM range. Just think of it as the engine's sweet spot. A regular internal combustion engine, or IC, is kind of fussy. It's only really making good, efficient power in a very, very narrow band of speed. You go outside of that little sweet spot, and it's either wasting fuel or just can't give you the power you need. And to put a number on it, your typical gas engine redlines at, maybe 7,000 RPM? But its best, most efficient working zone is way smaller than that. So if you just bolted the engine straight to the wheels, you'd stall trying to get started, and you'd literally tear the engine apart at highway speeds. It needs a helper, a middleman, and that's the gearbox. And this right here shows you just how complex that helper system is. Look at this whole chain of command. Power has to jump through all these hoops just to get from the gas tank to the pavement. The gearbox is really the star of the show here, constantly shifting ratios to keep that fussy engine happy. But with every single step, you're losing energy. This entire Rube Goldberg machine wastes about a quarter of the fuel's energy before it ever even spins the wheels. Okay, so now let's talk about the electric advantage. This is where the story gets a whole lot simpler. See, electric motors don't have that same dilemma. They work on a completely different principle, and that changes, everything. This quote really just nails it. Gearing is only efficient when the power source isn't efficient across a wide range of speeds. A gas engine is picky, so it needs help. But an electric motor, it's super flexible. That complex gearbox would just get in the way. And here it is, plain as day. Look at the difference. A gas engine is petering out around 7,000 RPM. A standard EV motor can happily spin up to 20,000 RPM. And here's the kicker. It delivers 100% of its torque, its pulling power, the instant you touch the pedal, right from 0 RPM. And it stays efficient across almost that entire massive range. It doesn't have a tiny sweet spot. The whole thing is the sweet spot. So that complicated path of power we saw just a minute ago, in an EV, it becomes this. Just look at how clean and direct that is. You go from the battery to the motor through one simple gear, called a reducer, which basically just slows down the motor's super high RPM to a usable speed for the wheels, and that's it. Straight to the road. This isn't just elegant, it is ridiculously efficient. We're talking about 95% of the battery's energy actually making it to the wheels. The best way to think about it is actually a ceiling fan. Right? You flip the switch and boom, it's immediately spinning at full power. There's no revving up, no warming up, no shifting through gears. It's just instant, smooth, quiet power. That's an EV motor. So you're probably wondering, okay, but are there any EVs with more than one gear? And yeah, the answer is yes, but they are the exception, not the rule, and they're usually built for some very specific and pretty cool reasons. If you look at the EVs that have played around with a manual transmission, they're almost all one-off concepts or super niche vehicles. You've got things like the Jeep Magneto, built for insane off-roading, or the Ford Mustang Lithium for drag racing, places where a driver might want that old-school hands-on control over a ridiculous amount of torque. And then you have these super expensive limited-run models that are basically just built for nostalgia. These are cool experiments, not a sign of things to come for the mainstream. And then there's the big one people always bring up, the Porsche Taycan. But here's the thing you have to know. It doesn't have a manual gearbox, not at all. It's got a 2-speed automatic on the rear axle. You, the driver, do nothing. The car shifts all by itself. First gear is for that mind-blowing acceleration off the line. And then at higher speeds, it shifts into second gear to improve efficiency and squeeze out about 5% more range. It's a performance optimization, not a necessity. And that actually brings us to a really fascinating debate. So we've pretty much established that gears aren't necessary for an EV to work. But could adding them back in actually make EVs better? Well, some engineers and researchers are starting to think so. Take a look at this. Some research on a BMW i3 found that while its single gear was already good, they could optimize it a bit more to hit about 90.7% efficiency. But now look at the next bar. By adding a multi-speed transmission, specifically a CVT, which has basically infinite gear ratios, they could push that efficiency up to 93.3%. Now that might not sound like a huge jump, but in a world where every single mile of range counts, that's a pretty big deal. For now, though, that single-gear design is king. So let's wrap this up by talking about what all this actually means for you, the driver. Why should you care if your car has 1 gear or 20? Well, the benefits are very real. First, you get that perfectly, uncannily smooth acceleration. No lurching or jerking as the car shifts. The car itself is lighter. And this is a big one. There are way fewer moving parts to break, wear out, or pay to maintain. That means better reliability, lower running costs, and a more efficient car overall. It's just a win-win-win. So we end up with this really cool thought. Gears were originally invented out of pure necessity, right? To work around the flaws of the gas engine. Today, that necessity is gone. But as engineers fight for every last drop of performance and every extra mile of range, could this old-school tech make a comeback? Not because it has to, but in the relentless quest for ultimate electric performance? The answer to that is going to be fun to watch.